Hello, my friends. Today we are continuing our series on surreal composite photography by talking about the shooting process. So if you want, you can gather images for your composites on stock photography sites. This is a perfectly fine way of working. Just be aware that if you do that, it is going to be a little more tricky for you to find images that are going to check all of the boxes that we talked about in the previous video. So as we talked about before, we want to match the lighting and the angle and things like that. And if we're shooting the images ourselves, we know that we can make sure that we are matching those things from our background to our subjects and objects and whatever else it is that we're bringing into the scene. Now, I do sometimes use some stock images in my composites. However, when I do, it's typically just kind of a last minute little flourish or something like that I feel like will just give it a little extra something. It's usually not any of my main subjects or the main objects and things like that I'm using, because I really plan for those pretty specifically. So let's begin by talking about our lighting. So I am using my Godox light. It's a 150 watt mono light, and I have a 38-inch softbox on that. It's just a round softbox, and I've placed that directly out in front of my subject and also up above. So we talked about how in our background image, it's a nice even lighting, and it's also coming from above. So in order to replicate that, I want a nice even lighting on my subject, and I also want it to come from up above. So this should be perfectly fine to replicate that for our image. Other things that I would like to note is that we said that we are angling up just a bit in our background image. So I have set my camera to be at just a slight up angle on my subject. It's nothing extreme, it's just a very slight up angle, and it was a very slight up angle in our background image as well. Now, aside from that, I'm using a black background, and the reason for that is that I want as much contrast as possible between my subject and my background. This is going to make it so much easier for me to select that subject off of the background when I get these images into Photoshop. So I'm wearing a black shirt, so obviously that wouldn't be a great choice for this, but this is actually going to be a nude, so I will take the shirt off, and then it'll just be flesh tone and then the light color of my hair against a black backdrop, so it'll be totally perfect. For right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of demonstrate for you my ideas here and how I'm executing it, and then we'll see the actual final images when we move into the editing process. So I use my mannequin Zora to get my framing on my shots and to just give me a general idea of where I need to be positioned in the frame in order to get everything looking the way that I want it to look, and also to test the lighting. The lighting's gonna look different on her face than it does on mine, because she's a mannequin, so she has like these perfectly kind of classic features and things like that, which I don't have. But aside from that, just little variations in the lighting, it's actually a really good way of testing everything out and making sure that you're ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and move her out of the way. And I'm also gonna grab my trigger. So I already know where I'm going to be standing. If this was a tighter frame, I would have actually marked my position on the floor, but because I have a little bit of wiggle room here, I'm not too worried about it. I know about where I need to be standing for this. So if you watched the previous videos, you know that we're going to be taking 2 shots of our subject, and I'm going to be the subject. This will be a self-portrait. So the first one, I'll just be standing in profile, arms at my side, eyes closed. And then in the second one, I will be standing in profile, but with my hand up and reaching out as though I'm touching the other figure's face. So I'm gonna flip one of the me's so that it's facing the other me. We're kind of facing each other, and then one has their hand over the other's face. So let's go ahead and do this. Just a couple of notes about things that I'm thinking about as I'm doing this. One thing that I always try to do when I'm doing self-portraits or portraits of other people is to make sure that the subject is going to look as good as possible. So you don't want to squish your arms into your body because that'll make your arms look a lot wider. So you want to kind of pop them out from your body a little bit. For me, I like to kind of bring the elbows back in though. So it's like the top of my arm is kind of popping out and then the elbows are coming back in. So it's kind of slimming the arm there a little bit. And then I am going to kind of suck my stomach in a little bit and just ever so slightly lean forward and try to stand up as straight as I possibly can. And then I will close my eyes and we'll take a few shots. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's really all I should need for that one because that's just such a simple shot. So I'm just checking to make sure these look the way that I want them to look. And I'm also checking my focus, which I always do. And these are totally perfect. So no problem there. And now all we need to do is get our second subject. So for our second subject, that subject is going to be reaching their hand out to cover the other subject's face, right? So I'm just gonna stand in the same position. I'm gonna probably get a little further into profile, and then I'm gonna bring this arm up. I don't wanna reach it out too far because I wanna stay within the frame that I have here. And I also want my subjects fairly close to one another. So I want it kind of like I'm just reaching up and just lightly touching the other figure's face. Since both figures are me, I know that if I keep my hand in line with my face, I will be positioned properly so that when I bring this into Photoshop, it should line up just right. So those are the things that I'm thinking about here. I want to make sure I keep this arm in nice and close to my body too. I don't want to pop it way out here because then it's going to look weird. It'll look a lot larger than the rest of me in the frame, which I don't want. So I'm just going to kind of get myself aligned here and take a couple shots. I will also be posing my eyes a bit. So instead of just looking straight ahead, I'll probably look a tiny bit more towards the camera. This is in order to avoid seeing only the whites of my eyes in the image because that'll look a little creepy, right? And that's not quite what we're going for here. Also, facial expression will matter in this shot because I do need to be sort of contemplatively looking at the other figure. So that's something that I will also be taking into consideration. Okay, so we'll just have a look at those and zoom in there. And yeah, these are looking just fine. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for. So that is actually all we need for this image, right? It was a very, very simple one. And that's part of why I decided to do it based on this particular composite, because keeping it simple early on is going to make things a lot easier for you. So we are now ready to go ahead and take these into Photoshop and start working on our composite.